Every morning for nearly 30 years, Harold Brooks sat on his stool by the entrance of the gleaming granite skyscraper that housed one of the city's largest tech firms, Ventec Global. His uniform, though faded, was pressed neatly each day. His routine was precise, a nod to every employee, a tip of the cap to each guest. But he might as well have been wallpaper. No one really saw Harold. New hires brushed past him, eyes glued to their phones. Executives mumbled greetings they didn't wait to hear echoed back. Even the janitorial staff had more conversations than he did. And Harold didn't mind. Not really. He had a job to do, to protect, to watch, to observe. Even if no one ever asked him his name. He had a small radio clipped to his belt and a clipboard where he jotted observations. Suspicious vehicles, deliveries that were late, or employees sneaking in with unregistered badges. His old eyes were sharper than most security systems, yet all anyone saw was an elderly man clinging to a paycheck. Harold had once served in the military, special forces, in fact, but that was decades ago. The medals sat in a box under his bed, forgotten like him. What kept him going wasn't pride or duty anymore, it was habit. And perhaps something deeper, the belief that one day he might still make a difference. Then came the day everything changed. It was supposed to be like any other, except that morning Harold noticed a man loitering near the rear exit. Odd. The man wasn't dressed like staff, and he kept scanning the building like he was clocking routines. Harold made a note and radioed the observation in. No response. Maybe the signal was bad. He decided to keep an eye on the guy. As the hours passed, the man didn't leave. When the CEO, Mr. Colton Avery, arrived for a surprise visit, something Harold had only seen once before in all his years. The stranger moved closer to the backloading dock. Something in Harold's gut twisted, and for the first time in years, he stepped away from his post. Harold moved with a quiet urgency, his polished shoes clicking softly against the tile floor as he made his way toward the back corridors. His hand rested near the small radio on his belt, though he knew by now no one would respond. The cameras might be watching, but none of the younger guards took him seriously. He was the old man at the front, reliable but forgettable. He slipped past the break room and into the narrow service hallway that led to the rear exit. The corridors were quiet, humming with the sound of ventilation and fluorescent lights. Then he saw him, the same man from earlier, crouched by the loading bay, fumbling with what looked like a maintenance panel. His hoodie was pulled tight, and he flinched as Harold approached. Harold's military instincts kicked in. The man's posture wasn't nervous, it was calculated. He was planting something. Wires. A small device. Harold's heart pounded. "Excuse me," Harold called, voice calm but commanding. The man turned, startled. For a split second, they locked eyes. Then the intruder bolted. Harold gave chase. His knees screamed with every step, but adrenaline drowned out the pain. They burst through the emergency exit, tripping the alarm. Harold tackled the man just outside, dragging him to the ground with a strength no one would expect from a 70-year-old. The intruder writhed and kicked, pulling a knife from his boot. Harold reacted without hesitation. He twisted the man's wrist, knocking the blade loose. It clattered to the pavement. Sirens began to wail in the distance. Other guards finally arrived, faces pale as they saw the scene unfold. The man was apprehended, and in his bag they found the truth. Blueprints of the building, access codes, and a time-delayed explosive device. The target? CEO Colton Avery's private meeting on the top floor. Harold had stopped a planned assassination. For the first time in decades, people truly looked at him, eyes wide, jaws slack. The old man at the front desk had just saved the company's most powerful man. And somewhere deep inside, Harold felt something stir. Not pride, not yet, but perhaps the quiet beginning of being seen. The next morning, Harold's world changed before he even stepped through the building's revolving doors. His face was on the front page of every major news site. Veteran security guard foils assassination attempt on billionaire CEO. The photo was grainy, a still from the security footage showing Harold pinning the would-be attacker to the ground. But it didn't matter. For the first time in years, he wasn't invisible. As he walked through the lobby, something strange happened. The same executives who used to breeze past him now paused, nodded, even offered a handshake. The young receptionist, who'd never bothered to learn his name, smiled shyly and said, "Morning, Mr. Finch." That name, Mr. Finch, echoed in his ears like a foreign melody. For too long, he'd just been the old guy. He reached his post near the elevators, but it was already surrounded by reporters, their cameras flashing like fireworks. Building management had tried to keep them out, but the story had grown too big. Everyone wanted to meet the man who had saved Colton Avery's life. And then Colton himself appeared. Flanked by 2 assistants and a handful of anxious-looking board members, the billionaire CEO walked straight toward Harold. The crowd fell into a hush. Colton, tall and sharply dressed in a navy suit, extended his hand without hesitation. "You saved my life," he said, voice steady. "I owe you more than I can say." Harold, caught off guard, gave a firm shake. "Just doing my job, sir." Colton let out a short laugh. "Then maybe it's time we redefined your job." He turned to his assistant and said something quietly. Within minutes, Harold was being escorted upstairs, not to the security office, but to the executive level. The same floor he'd never been allowed to set foot on in 20 years. As the elevator doors closed, Harold looked back through the glass. The lobby, the people, the cameras, they were all behind him now. Ahead was something unknown, something earned, something overdue. And for the first time in a long time, Harold Finch stood a little taller. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing a floor Harold had only ever seen from surveillance monitors. Polished marble gleamed underfoot, and glass walls framed a breathtaking skyline view. This was the heart of the empire, where decisions moved markets and lives changed overnight. And now, the old security guard stood right in the middle of it. Colton Avery led Harold into a sleek corner office, one that had remained empty for months after a former VP resigned in disgrace. "This is yours," Colton said plainly. "Effective today, you're our new Director of Security Strategy and Crisis Response." Harold blinked. "Sir, I know exactly what you've never had," Colton interrupted gently. "You've never had the respect you deserve. You've never had the tools to lead, even though you've been leading by example every single day. I'm not offering charity, Harold. I'm correcting a mistake this company made for years." The room was silent, save for the hum of the city below. Harold's hands trembled slightly as he ran his fingers along the edge of the desk. His uniform, the one he'd worn for nearly 2 decades, suddenly felt out of place. Yet, somehow he belonged here. Soon after, HR arrived with paperwork. A company car, a new wardrobe stipend, an assistant. Everything moved fast, like the world was trying to make up for lost time. But Harold took it all in quietly, his military-honed discipline grounding him in chaos. By afternoon, a press conference had been arranged. Colton insisted Harold be at the center, not as a background hero, but as the man who reminded the world that value isn't tied to suits or titles. Cameras flashed as Harold spoke, voice steady but humble. "I never wanted recognition," he said, "but maybe what happened reminds us to look twice at the people we pass every day. You never know who's watching, or who's ready to act." That night, Harold sat behind his new desk, looking out over the city lights. The office phone rang, his first official call. He picked it up and simply said, "Harold Finch speaking." From forgotten to featured, from the shadows to the spotlight. But for Harold, nothing changed at his core. He was still the man who showed up every day, rain or shine, to protect others. The difference now was that, finally, the world saw him. Weeks passed, but the buzz around Harold Finch hadn't faded. If anything, it had grown. News outlets dubbed him the Guardian of Granite Tower, while think pieces flooded the internet, calling his story a lesson in humility and hidden greatness. But Harold remained grounded, arriving early, sipping the same black coffee, and greeting everyone, from executives to janitors, with the same quiet respect. But what truly transformed was the culture of the company. Inspired by Harold's story, Avery Industries launched a program called Eyes on Integrity, designed to recognize and uplift long overlooked staff, cleaners, clerks, guards, drivers, anyone who made the building function but had been invisible for far too long. Harold insisted on sitting on the panel personally, ensuring the recognition was real, not just a PR move. He remembered too well what it felt like to be ignored. One afternoon, Harold walked into the same lobby he used to patrol, now with a different badge, not of authority but of influence. A young intern stopped him shyly, holding a sketch. It was a charcoal portrait of Harold, standing straight with a slight smile, drawn entirely from memory. "You made me want to do more than just show up," she said, voice trembling. Harold took the drawing gently, touched beyond words. The elevator ride to the top floor never got old. But today, as the doors opened, he saw something new. A wall had been installed near the executive suite with portraits of employees from every department. At the center, under bold gold letters that read "Honor in the Everyday," was a photo of Harold in his security uniform. The day he joined, not when he saved the CEO, but before anyone noticed him at all. Because that was the point. Later that evening, as Harold walked to the parking garage, still preferring to drive himself, he passed by the new head of security. A younger man, eager and disciplined, saluted him with pride. Harold smiled and nodded. "You don't need a title to matter," he said softly. "Just keep doing the right thing when no one's watching." The world had finally caught up to Harold Finch. But he hadn't changed for it, he had changed it. Not by shouting, not by demanding, but by simply standing guard until the world finally opened its eyes.